Hey there, film fans. I'm Jeff.
I'm Dave.
And I'm John, and welcome back to The Love of Cinema, a pod in which we'll challenge one another to discuss movies, both new and old, with a strictly positive critical eye.
That's right. And to avoid any lazy negativity, we have decided to make this here episode a drinking game.
This episode?
Oh, we did the double open at the same time.
Yeah, we haven't
That's
been drinking
right.
all year. No.
So that means, here's the gimmick, people. Anytime we say anything negative about a film, or if we just say something stupid, you're going to hear this sound. That sound means drink. I'm going to go ahead because I heard it.
Yeah.
And once
you're
you,
a sheep.
that'll keep us on track so we're not those stuffy negative critics you're sick of hearing. We are a positive film criticism podcast who gets drunk.
Positive.
So pour yourselves a glass, join us, and give it us up for the films we love, and perhaps the films that need some love. It's an interesting selection this week.
Perhaps. Yeah. We're going to keep it moving because we're going to do a Facebook Live session soon. But before we get on to films from the year 1962, let's send it over to John for some quick shout outs.
All right, the shout-outs, as always, our beer sponsor. Believe it or not, he's still our guy, even though we haven't had his delicious brews in way too fucking long, but he still exists. His name is Carlos Barroso. He is in Queens, New York. Follow him on Instagram to check out all of his awesome updates for his home brews at C Barroso Bar 2019. That is CBARROZOBAR 2019. And as always, the music you hear on this every episode and every other motherfucking episode is provided by the artist Dasein. That's Dasein, Dasein. You can find all the music available for free downloads at soundcloud.com/Dasein-artist.
Yes. Thank you, John, for reminding us that there is an explicit content warning, if you notice.
There's a motherfucking explicit content warning.
All right, people, we're talking... we're gonna do our usual round of what you've been watching and any news stories in our second segment, but we want to get into it, so we are going to start with a quick little recap of what's going on in 1962. 1962, Kennedy is president. How about that? What a time in our life. We were almost out of Vietnam. Almost. Anyway, 1962, number one film at the box office. Not a surprise to anybody. Number one film at the box office?
Lawrence of Arabia?
Lawrence of Arabia, $20 million worldwide on a budget of $15 million, which those are big numbers in 1962.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And the $15 million budget was way higher than it was supposed to be. That shit took a long time to film. That movie is very long.
Steven
awesome.
Spielberg did the inflation measurement one time, and he estimated it would be $330 million to make that movie today.
Oh my gosh. I mean, also the setbacks and who knows how many camels died during filming.
2 years of shooting.
I mean, I don't think so. They just do it all on a digital stage. We're good.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're right.
To make it, to make it real the way he made it, it would be right.
One of the all-time shots is the reveal of Omar Sharif when he comes out of the Oasis. That special lens they used is literally in the Hall of Fame. The lens they used to film that shot is literally in the Hall of Fame. Anyway, we got to keep it moving. We're not talking about Lawrence of Arabia.
How did they say action to him? How did they call action on that shot?
They probably, honestly, they probably fired a weapon of some kind, and it probably had real bullets. Okay,
so good.
Number 2 is The Longest Day at 17 million, which is a lot. How about that shit?
Wow.
Oh my god! And somehow that day was longer than Lawrence of Arabia. Number 3, we get a Disney movie in there, In Search of the Castaways. And then one thing that we definitely noticed is a lot of musicals going on in 1962. So you have The Music Man, starring Robert Preston there at number 4. You have Touch of Mink. Mutiny on the Bounty was another film we discussed talking about. You have To Kill a Mockingbird, which more on that soon. You have Hatari. It's a Paramount picture. You have the original film of Gypsy. There's another musical. And you have Bon Voyage, The Interns, making $5 million. That's the top 10 at the box office. And if you want to go over to the Oscars, the big news story was really To Kill a Mockingbird versus Lawrence of Arabia. Very notable. David Lean won for directing Lawrence of Arabia, which also won Best Picture. You also have The Miracle Worker, which won a bunch of awards, including Best Actress Anne Bancroft and Best Supporting Actress Patty Duke. You have Ed Begley Sr., to all of our 80s television fans. Ed Begley Sr. wins an Oscar for Sweet Bird of Youth for supporting actor. And then Best Actor, you have Gregory Peck versus Peter O'Toole. What a showdown. Yeah. Gregory Peck takes it. I have a feeling if he had won for any of the films he had done previously, they probably would have sided with Peter O'Toole, but I am not on that campaign.
Which is weird that they like passed that off to Peter O'Toole, who eventually won for Lion in Winter, and everyone thinks that was not the one he should have won for.
I don't think he didn't win for Lion.
Oh, he didn't win for that. Right? He never won one. They gave him an honorary one later because he should have won for exactly.
And he basically took that honorary one and he said, "Go fuck yourself." Any other movies that you guys noticed that I didn't say?
2 honorable mentions. This is the year of Stanley Kubrick's first movie that he made kind of on his own, where he wasn't basically hired by Kirk Douglas to come in for a movie we talked about at the very beginning of our podcast. Was it our first episode when we talked about
first episode.
Damn, what's the name? What's the name?
Paths of Glory.
Fuck, Paths of Glory. And then he made Spartacus. And then this year, 1962, was his first one on his own with his producing partner. He made Lolita, which was a very risky first film. And my very legendary Russian director, Andrei Tarkovsky, made his first feature film, Ivan's Childhood, which did very well internationally. It's an amazing film. You should check that out, too. Anyway.
You also have the original Cape Fear for all my Scorsese fans. That remake in the 90s is awesome with De Niro. And I guess that's it for now. We can move it on. Anything else, Dave?
No, I think we covered it.
Awesome. Okay, so as you saw in the episode notes, we're going to start with To Kill a Mockingbird. Heard of it, people? Harpy Lee's book. Just said, starring Gregory Peck, and one of the all-time great child performances in our Scout, who is, she's not on the first page here. I'm gonna bomb her name.
Yeah.
Oh, God damn it.
That's Jeff. That's Jeff attempting
What's her name?
Filler. Jeff.
Yeah, where the fuck is she? Hold on, wait. Is Jean?
She's right down the bottom. She's right down the bottom.
Dave, you can say it.
On the list.
Yeah, what is...
No, I just remember looking at it earlier and I was like, why is she not at the top? Like,
oh, here you go.
Kim's in the whole movie.
Oh, nope. That's her as an adult.
I'm going to find it. You keep going.
All right, sorry about that. Okay, sorry. To Kill a Mockingbird first. Then we're going to talk about whatever happened
to... Mary Badham. Mary Badham. Badham, Badham.
All right, and then the second film we're going to be talking about is Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, which is a fantastic film.
That's so cool.
If you have ever seen FEUD or heard of FEUD, the Ryan Murphy show with Susan Sarandon and, oh my God, Jessica Lange. Right? Yes, they play original movie stars.
Muse.
Yeah, they play Bette Davis and
Joan
Crawford. Oh, the beer is not hitting me yet. Oh,
it's a group effort. It's a group effort. No, it takes 3.
It's a fantastic film with the
Jeff's
two of them.
The
2 of them playing sisters that are totally fucking with each other. It's so fun.
Yes, and then stay tuned. Join us live. So fun. That was a fun movie.
And then the last film we're going to talk about
the title does not give away where that goes at all.
Yeah, it's Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. I don't know. And the final film that we'll be discussing is our redemption film, or Was It Really That Bad? And that goes to Godzilla vs. King Kong, 1962.
Specifically the American version, because that's the only one we could find because of some research. And you cannot find the Japanese. It literally has not been released except through Criterion Spine Collection, which we don't have access to since we only do this. We picked them within a week. We didn't have time to order a fucking Blu-ray DVD.
But you know what we saw? We saw King Kong versus Godzilla. Godzilla versus King Kong. That's what we saw. So we're going to try to redeem that at the end once we're nice and saucy. But we got to get into To Kill a Mockingbird. As I said, starring Gregory Peck and Mary Badham, of course. It is a fantastic film based on the Harper Lee novel. It's also the breakout for Robert Duvall, who you will see later in life, playing Boo.
Doesn't say a word.
Radley does not say a word, but certainly speaks a lot with whatever the hell is going on with his face and his body in there. You also have Brock.
I'm sorry, just quickly on him. When you finally see him full, did he resemble the giant from Twin Peaks, or is it just me?
I guess a little bit. That's good. All my Lynch fans out there. Nice. Oh my gosh. Anyway, fantastic cast. You also have Brock Peters plays Tom Robinson, the man on trial for raping a woman who I'm going to go ahead and spoil that he probably didn't rape. Has to turn his duty as a lawyer. This is set in Alabama in the 1920s. It is based on that Harper Lee's mom knew about when she grew up. So it is loosely based on Harper Lee's childhood. And apparently Truman Capote, her childhood friend, is the inspiration for one of the younger friend characters in this film. All right, I'll leave it there. Directed by Robert Mulligan. It's an all-timer. All right, so who wants to get it into it? Who wants to go?
I just want to say we're going into this with the knowledge that King Kong versus Godzilla has a Criterion spine number, and this doesn't.
Really? Well, maybe they think that this film, or maybe even this. Do you think it's a studio thing? Do you think the studio knows that this is like precious material?
I don't. Do you have to pay for Criterion, or like are they putting?
They usually select you, but they usually try to do stuff that needs their help. You know what I mean? But it is also a money thing. Like Paul Thomas Anderson isn't in Criterion. You would think somebody in the artistic kind of vein would be. Not all Kubrick is in the Criterion by any means. So it's weird. It's hit or miss. They did. The only reason I would comment on that is because last year they did a big deal where they got all of Hishiro Honda's Godzilla works, and they like brought them all back to life. So it was a recent thing. It's not like that.
Yeah.
It's not like they were like, fuck To Kill a Mockingbird. Let's do Godzilla. Like I feel like that just happened recently. Anyway, when was the last time you guys watched this movie? Have you ever seen this movie?
Never seen this movie and never read the book.
Yeah.
I had no experience.
Never seen the movie.
Yeah, I had no experience with what this was at all, and I went in completely blind.
Well, based on your accent, the listeners probably wouldn't be too surprised to know that this wasn't required reading for you. And it was certainly required reading for all of us, whether or not we did.
Did you know the story?
Nope.
What?
All right. Well,
wow.
Do you mind starting? Like, I want to know it because, like, this is such a famous, iconic pillar of literature and fiction and movie as well. Not just the assigned reading the book.
Yeah,
in middle school.
I've heard of this thing for years, and I never I didn't really look into it as much, and I wish I had, having seen what I saw now. Like, I just enjoyed it on another. Like, I enjoyed it and was appalled by it because, like, basically, it's it's in Alabama. There's a black guy on trial for raping a white woman, and so as you can imagine, it's not going to go well.
So there's
set in the 30s. There is there's a lot of content there. A couple of times there where they drop racial slurs, and to be honest, in my opinion, necessary for the story. In this case, it was necessary to highlight the times. I feel like when they removed Gone with the Wind and put it back with like an advisory and a discussion, I feel like this could, like, if this ever gets on streaming, it could benefit from that as well. Like a discussion on this was the times, this was the culture, and let's have a discussion about that. But in general, the story basically starts out so innocent. It's a neighborhood, which I found out, I researched. They actually built that neighborhood on the Universal lot.
Whoa.
It looks like a fucking neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing. It's a well-deserved Oscar for art direction that this won.
Yeah,
I believe. But I enjoyed the setup of this film so much that I forgot to take notes. I just got wrapped up in what was going on. I'm just like, these kids are amazing. And it would have really dragged if those kids weren't as good as they were. I do want to kind of bring up the friend.
Yeah.
He was
too performy child actory?
No, that kid's gonna grow up to be a fucking serial killer, man. He's like, let's go look at the haunted house. Let's go look at the bodies. Let's go to the courthouse. Yeah. My dad has 15 different jobs. His dad has more origin stories than the fucking Joker.
I mean, I don't think he knew who his dad was.
No, I think he was making it up every time. But yeah. But even then, like, even this kid was like, at first he was a little bit, he's not as good as the other kids, but he really fell into it and grew. And it was like, there's not once in this whole fucking thing you're thinking about the acting at all. It's just like, they're not acting.
I know, it is unreal. I struggle with child performances too, just in general. Because unless they're amazing, it's really easy, I think, to see. Of course, we can see bad acting on anyone, but for adults to make it into like really good movies, they're probably really good, and it's so easy to see if they're bad opposite other good actors in good movies. But sometimes not great child actors sneak into really good adult performances.
I just played that back in my head, and I just want to clarify, when I say they're not acting, that was a compliment.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
I mean, I don't know how the fuck they got. Robert Mulligan directed this. He didn't make anything else that's quite this popular and successful, and I do not know how he got the casting and the work out of these children, because they're still considered some of the greatest child performances of all time, and it's well deserved. I think it's also
I mean, I did read some notes where he said that he would just let them play and let the cameras roll. And he learned to get it in the first 2 takes because after that, they just lost it. So that's a really good example of a director adapting to working with. I mean, we tried working with a kid once. That didn't go as well as these kids did, but it still went pretty good.
She was like 3 years old though. That was more.
She was 3 years old and cute as hell too.
So cute. Hey Marley.
What's she, like 7 now?
That's at least right. Yeah, it was so long ago. Steven Spielberg has referred to this because he works with kids a lot, and I like listening to Steven talk about working with children and performance because he gets such a kick out of the way that he has to adapt to working with them. And he's referred to this movie before and how Robert Mulligan would get them to play, get them to interact with each other so that they don't really know that you're going to call action eventually. They understand the technical aspect, but they don't really know that you're going to want them to hit this moment and this moment at this moment. You're just trying to get them to feel comfortable and real. And I also think this is to heighten this even more. Sometimes we could say, well, yeah, but Gregory Peck is so wonderful with them that of course they feel comfortable, but there are a lot of scenes where it's just the children and they are just carrying a lot of the story, and the relationship between Jem and Scout is magnificent. It's not just one child and you're capturing like really good moments and there's a lot of cutting. These are long takes with long scenes of children talking to each other and playing and behaving and choreographed all over that neighborhood you talked about. It really is astonishing.
And it's so good. You fall into what the kids are doing so much that when the older lady from the neighborhood walks up and starts talking to him, you're like, oh, go away. Like you're interfering with playtime here. But I was here like 20 minutes in, and I think it's about 22 minutes in. All that innocence that was built up just gets snapped out in one statement. And you're like, okay, that there's a whole other world going on here that these kids are not aware of, and it's not pleasant. And it kind of sets you up. It's where one of the actors drops the racial slur that and you're like, oh, fun's over, and it kind of pulls you back a little bit. And I feel like to be honest, this whole story is a little bit about kids losing their innocence as they realize that adults or like people in general can just be fucking evil.
I think that is literally the whole story. Like that is the theme, right? And I'm going to push back on you just a little bit. Maybe we can have our conversation about watching this with a responsible audience mindset of, looking at this as that time capsule. I think unlike Gone with the Wind, maybe the reason we don't need to have a preemptive conversation or a nice written passage on the streaming service is because Atticus teaches us along with the children, don't say that word. Yeah. And here's why. And he teaches them through behavior. And the children are so obviously learning to be good human beings by watching the good adults, including their father.
That's a very good point, because every time it happens, that person is identified as bad.
Right. Exactly.
So that's a very good point.
Unlike Scarlett O'Hara, and I'm not like calling you out, but like I've thought about this a lot. I was thinking about when we were watching this movie. Nobody tells Scarlett O'Hara don't use that word. There is a difference. It is kind of praised with the way the romanticism of the culture with a movie like Gone with the Wind versus the narrator, Scout, as an adult, is referring to how she learned about how the world really works through this terrible little microcosm. There's 2 big things going on, right? There's this case that Atticus Finch is dealing with where a black man is accused of raping a white woman. And then we also have this wonderful, which is their introduction to kind of the real world. Then we also have this wonderful symbolism of children fearing what they don't understand with their scary neighbor, Boo Radley, who is Robert Duvall. And the Harper Lee, we have to give it up for her for writing this just amazing tale, because Stephen King often talks about how childhood is a secret society. It has rules of its own. It has a culture of its own. And I think this movie and this book, what it does so well is that it bridges the gap. It allows you to have that nostalgic thing where you can have a coming of age story as an audience member with these children, but you can also sit back as an observer of these children learning those harsh truths. You don't feel like you're stuck in one or the other. I do feel like I have Scout's perspective. Don't get me wrong, and I think you're supposed to. But Atticus doesn't seem unattainable to me. Did you guys feel that? Does he seem too perfect to you, or does he seem like he's trying to do the right thing in a bad world, or in a not perfect world?
He seems accessible. For sure.
I mean, I love right at the beginning, he establishes that he gets to know people. So he knows that, like, the guy who drops the flat, like, the whatever is uncomfortable with being thanked. It's straight up. You're like, this guy gets to know people for who they are and respects that.
Yes, dude. And I feel like I'm a huge proponent of that adage, and I think it's very timely right now. If anyone needs some healing or is confused about whatever the other side is thinking, whatever side you think you're on right now in this rift that we're living in, there's a scene in this movie where the client is being held at the jail, and they're concerned that he is going to be attacked that night. So Atticus Finch goes and stays in front of the jail the entire time, and a group of very angry rural white men who are on the side of the farmer who is accusing this man of raping his daughter come to obviously lynch him. We have to use the right word. It would be a lynching. Yes. You know, that is exactly what they would have planned to do. And the children run up because they were worried about their dad. They just don't know why he escaped in the middle of the night. And the children are right there. And because the children are there, she starts talking to that character you're talking about, Dave. And it shuts the whole operation down. And I'm a huge adage of the everything you ever needed to learn, you learned in kindergarten.
Yeah.
This is just one of those examples that it's a perfect essential moment for what we were just talking about, that you have the ability to still see the world through Scout's eyes, even though as an audience member, you're so scared at that moment for all of them. You're scared for Gregory Peck because he might not be able to protect himself, or he might get ashamed in front of his children. Obviously, something terrible might happen that these children would witness. And then this beautiful truth comes out because that man just can't stand to look at Scout and not let her be as genuine as she is, and be so curious about why they're doing there, or what they're going to do there.
She disarms it with perfectly innocent questions.
Yeah,
that make him remember his humanity. Yeah,
and also, why aren't you responding to me? Yeah, she's asking the guy. She's like, "Hey, I know you're your son," and the guy's because, and I would say to what you said about reaching out to the other side, because this is the point of this is to be culturally relevant, right? So whether it's talking about critical race theory, whether it's talking about childhood, whether it's talking about all the different issues it's brought up, the point is to be relevant to the time and place. This is set in the it says Depression era, so I guess you could say 30s. I thought that the story was supposed to be 20s, but 20s or 30s Alabama, very racist Alabama, very unemployed because they're all at the courthouse every day during the week. But the book comes out after World War II, and now here's the movie in 1962. So when it comes out, it's meant to be read later. You know, it's meant to be where are we now? And the reason that schools still teach this, which is it's sort of being discussed a lot right now of whether or not we should continue to teach it, but it's meant to be where are we now? And I think schools,
spoiler alert, you should.
Well, and schools are rightfully so, and people online, you know, who maybe have a lot of reason to be angry with society right now and how we haven't advanced very far. They're thinking, does this isolate the students of color? Because the only people that they can relate to are the very, very obviously, very seriously and unjustly oppressed. And so now, are you creating?
Yeah, that's a valid point.
Are you creating a divide in school? Because the misconception about people who read this book 30 years ago, like me, and not 30, but 20 years ago, and we see it through Atticus's eyes, but it's actually Scout's story. And actually, there was a play on Broadway a couple years ago, which was a very, very good play from everything I've heard. It was sold the fuck out, so I never saw it when I was available. My parents saw it, everybody I know saw it and loved it. They go right to the court scene. Pretty much right early on, and they intersperse the kids a little bit. They're played by adults, but it's mostly about the trial because that's what Aaron Sorkin, the playwright, thinks is the most dramatic. But the story is Scout's, so it's part like It. You know, Boo Radley's house is sort of like the scary house that the clown is living in It, right? So that's what you feel like when you read it, and putting the dog down, and all of the allegories in the book. Dave, everything in the movie's in the book, every single thing. Obviously, they have to cut it down, but. The point I'm making, to try to come back to what we were saying before, is not just about how do we discuss critical race theory? How do we do that now? Does this book, should it stay? Should it go? I think it should stay because it's from the child's point of view, and it's I don't want to conflate any other issues besides this, because this deserves its own conversation.
But also bring it back to that point that you made about whether some of the kids would feel uncomfortable in the class because they identify with the black characters in the book. What a great discussion to have amongst yourselves. Right. It's like, I feel uncomfortable because I identify with those kids. And what a great discussion for kids to have.
And hopefully what you get out of this
is,
especially through reading it, which is different from seeing the movie, is Scout doesn't get it. And she shouldn't. Does that make sense? Like, she shouldn't get it. Like, we should be reading it and saying, she's scared of Boo. Why is there another villain who's approachable and kind? Why are they the villain? Boo should be the villain. And of course, Boo's not, they're not the villain. The villain is the angry mob.
Because kids have their own rules.
Yeah. So to wrap it all the way,
and I think the ultimate aim,
to wrap it really quick, just to wrap it,
dude,
wrap it all the way back up to that character who is the racist without the hood on, right? Who Scout is talking. He's like, I know your son. Why aren't you talking to me? I know your son. And the guy immediately realizes he's been unrobed, for lack of a better words. And then he's basically like, oh, it's okay. We can leave. This is fine. Yeah, I know you, Scout. Nice to see you. I'll tell my son you say hi. People in real life, we can't tell the difference between what's a show and what's reality anymore. I think that's the most simplistic way of putting it. You can blame a lot of different things, misinformation, anger, whatever, but like, we don't know the difference between reality and this fiction. And I think this movie, if we just want to talk about the movie, does that. It brings it up. It's a show. These people at the courtroom and their anger, when they leave the courtroom, are they really going to feel that much better about themselves? Maybe, but in long term, no. It's just a show, and all we need to do is show them, that they're behind the curtain, and I don't know. There's just so many different ways of thinking about it. But I thought this movie was really great to watch now with this critical lens.
Yeah, this definitely inspired a really good discussion. I just want to for a second touch on the court scene and get back to the technicalities of the film itself, because in my opinion, that courtroom scene is so well directed, and it's not just like Gregory Peck that's well directed. The background actors, if you stop and look at the background actors, every time he makes a point leading to that guy's innocence, they glare at him. They hate him more. Mm-hmm. Like, the judge is leaning back in his chair. He's not even listening. He's already ruled. Like, there's all this subtle direction right down to, and the one that I actually made a note about was the court officer who walks him in at the beginning, who walks, what's his name?
Tom?
Yeah, Tom. Yeah. Sorry. Who walks him in at the beginning. Literally just walks in, lets go, and lets the other guy tape him and walks off. He doesn't want anything to do with him. After they do the arguments, and it starts to look like, basically they discount everything that these people are saying, and it shows that he very well is innocent. The court officer walks in, unlocks him himself, and gives him an understanding look, like, sorry. And it's just those little subtle performances, like that's a throwback to like 40 minutes before, and it's just this guy has been swayed by the arguments in that courtroom, but no one else has.
I wrote down that the judge thinks the jury fucked up too.
Yeah,
the judge thinks he does. That court officer though, there was and I can't remember it exactly, but I know exactly what you're talking about, because I remember he has an opposite reaction when she is being the counter argument, the counter questioning, when Atticus is asking her, and he's leading her into her own narrative to prove that when she has the realization that she was never hit. And then he's like, so what you're saying is blah, blah, blah. And the guy at the court officer behind her, he doesn't like that. Like, that's too far for him. You know what I mean? Like, so I love what you're saying, because this is good casting for background. Every detail matters in movie making. It helps that you can see conflict and subtle racism. Yeah. Like, that man may have thought like, I'm on the right side of this, until that moment happened. And I don't know if it was directed or not, but the fact that it's so obviously right there in the background, in frame.
I mean, if that's just an actor making a choice, that's phenomenal. Like, if that was just him, that's
making
amazing.
A choice, and director allowing us to use that cut, because he was like, that's rich. Right. Or who knows how it happened. But there are so many details that are clearly going back to what we've been talking about. This book is supposed to bring up conflict. It is supposed to help you understand that Scout doesn't understand the conflict yet, and that you can only really learn how to be a good person by questioning all of those conflicts. So if we were, these are just my 2 cents, but the answer isn't to get rid of things like this. The answer is to have, we should be reading this, and then we should have them reading Their Eyes Were Watching God, right? We need to have both things. We need to have conversations for both, so that everyone can have a perspective to understand. One of the criticisms, and this might be a little dangerous to get into this, AFI's #1 protagonist for a long time, top 100 protagonist, hero, whatever, has been Atticus Finch. And I know that the white savior thing is a real issue of conflict, and I'm not degrading that at all. It might be. And I totally understand that. I'm more interested in having that conversation than I am of not talking about it, than I am of saying, we can't praise him. We can't do this. I want to watch this movie. I want everyone to watch these kinds of things. I want us all to read more and watch more so that we can get in to discuss whether or not what that actually means, as opposed to the idea of it. The idea of it is less interesting to me because how do you guys feel after watching this movie? All right. Yeah. Like Dave, you just watched it.
Yeah. I don't think he fell into that at all because he was helping multiple people in the town. It showed him help everyone. Like he was always there for everyone. He was the person who fought the battles for whoever needed the battles fighting. He was there to shoot the dog when the other guy couldn't do it. He was there, like he was the guy who was there for everyone.
Also, we're talking about the story a lot, and I guess we should make sure that we stay. Dave, you've never read the book, but the one thing that's I think is very clear in the book is that Atticus is the hero, maybe, but it's from Scout's point of view. So much of this is the kid looking up to the parent, right? We're not seeing Atticus solving racism through the enclave in the courtroom. We're seeing it through Scout's point of view 100% of the time in the book. It's through Scout's point of view. And I think the movie does as good as you can possibly do doing a point of view work like that as it possibly can. And so if its children will listen, right? All our Sondheim fans out there, if anything, if as you reread it again as a parent, you want your kid to see you doing the right thing. And you know what? That does get near why people solve racism, but ultimately it shouldn't. But it's murky, and so I'm willing to have the conversation with anybody who wants to have it. But I think they pull it off well.
I just want to.
Yeah, I mean, I want to
redirect for a second too in a minute.
What are the last lines of this film? It goes back to the narration of her as an adult, and I'm gonna misquote it, but she basically says because Jim has been hurt by Ewell, the guy, the accuser, and Jim is injured, and they're sitting there by the bed. Everybody's left, and it's just her father, Atticus, and her. And it goes back to the narration. She says, and Atticus would sit there with him all night, and he'll also be there tomorrow. And it's just the idea of continuing to try to be good in a world that is going to continue to give you obstacles. So I also think you have to, it makes me nervous to have large blanket ideas projected upon really good literature and art in general, because I think the nuance is so important. If this is not flexible enough to have a more interesting and productive conversation around the conflict that obviously she was trying to raise, she was trying to comment on this, Harper Lee, when she was writing this, then I think that is a testament to us clinging to a lazy way to go about solving a very complicated issue, like navigating racism in a country as fucked up as ours, with a history like ours.
Yeah.
Anyway, I know that's intense, but Dave, hit me.
Yeah, no, I just want to talk about the ending briefly, because a lot of people, one of the criticisms they come forward with this movie is they're disappointed because the real suspect in this doesn't get his comeuppance, and that's one of the few things I knew going in. And so I was expecting nothing, but I actually the scene where he goes up to tell the family that the tragedies happened at the end, and then the guy who is actually the suspect, who was the actual through insinuation, the abuser, he turns up and
drunk.
He's drunk, but that and he spits in his face, and that final look that Peck gives him when he spits in his face, and he just holds for a second and then gets his handkerchief out and wipes it off, and it's it speaks volumes. It's this wipes off, but the stain on your soul will last forever. Exactly. For what you've done. And I think that's a perfect comeuppance. That's all you could expect in a story if you want to stay true to the story in that time, because they can't do anything else really.
I almost felt it was, the end of JFK where he finally looks in the camera and he basically says, we're telling a movie, but what, you watching this, that's what this is for. I almost feel like that obviously wouldn't have been called for in this movie, but it was that moment where it's would you punch him? Would you hit him? Would that recycle everything? Would that undo a lot of the good? I thought that was one of those powerful moments.
Yeah. Also further on the comeuppance, he fell on his knife.
Yeah, that's a good story.
I laughed out loud when that happened. I was like, "Oh yes, okay, that's a little good bit."
It is weird. I think that is important. Just the last thing I'll say about that. I think that is super important. I think sometimes people underplay that specific part of the story because what has this story told us thematically about the justice system up until that point? Everything we want to believe about what Atticus bases his principles on, his entire final argument is that every man is treated equal, every woman and man are treated equal in almost nowhere in this country except for the justice system. He really believed that, which we know is not true. Like we knew it, they probably knew it then, we know it now, but he was trying to hold those principles up. And then this movie ends with a manipulation of the justice system to try to defend the theme of that would be as bad as killing a mockingbird, to out Boo Radley and to actually hold him accountable to a murder when he was doing something that was ultimately good. So again, I feel like it just takes it even, she turns the knife at the very end to try to make you understand that every single decision that is ever made, we have institutions like justice systems that are important, but those institutions are made up of individuals. Mm. And at the end of the day, you are still going to be Scout. You are still Scout and Jim. You're going to have to figure this shit out for yourself, and you're going to have to work to figure that out. And you're going to have to look to the people like Atticus and others that maybe you would choose to respect that are willing to risk the conflict, that don't have all the answers, that are willing to get out there and put their feet in the water and try to figure it out.
And it's just a good movie. We're talking about narration. We're not talking about.
It's a great movie.
Dave mentioned the art direction, but this is a narrative film. You don't have to have a conversation like this after seeing it. If you're out there and you're wondering if you should watch it, don't be intimidated by this talk that we're having. If you want to put it off to the side, have the conversation.
You can go as deep as you want in this movie because it does gloss over it with a little bit of childhood innocence, but like they don't go as deep as they could have. So if anything, it's a healthy watch, and I feel like.
I don't think it ever gets sentimental though.
Right.
No, that's why the child innocence is great for me. And I know I've said this on this pod before, like my favorite kinds of stories, especially like narrative driven fiction, especially first person point of view driven narrative fiction, is insulated stuff that feels like it's as big as any tiny little relationship you've ever had with your friends and family, and it deals with everything. And this is one of those movies. Yeah. It will bring up everything if you let it, but it's going to do it just through something that's super relatable with coming of age. And so, I don't know. It's probably as good as it gets for that kind of thing.
Also, I feel like we'll kind of get criticized if we don't. That's for everyone. That's for everyone.
This is a buzz-free.
Let's pour this one out for Harper.
Segment.
God damn it.
Well, let's just say I would have been buzzed for the cameo performance of the quote-unquote victim of the rape, who, of course, it's going to be... I don't want to spoil it for anybody that just kind of forgets. That is a fantastic scene in the courtroom, and the way that Jim's able to hold it together. Anyway, we don't need to keep going in circles. Go watch this film again. I saw this on Freebie, the app. It's on Prime for a couple dollars. Give it another look. Brock Peters, who played Tom, actually gave Gregory Peck's eulogy in 2003.
Yes. Holy shit.
40 years later. They were really, really good friends for the rest of the film. James Earl Jones auditioned for the role, but it went to Brock Peters, who was pissed off that he was typecast as the monster all the time. But this movie cuts deep, but if you just want to laugh about Scout being a tomboy and not wanting to wear a dress, that is one of my favorite deliveries of all time, is when she doesn't want to go to school wearing a dress because she's a tomboy, and she says, I still don't get why I have to wear a doggone dress. And the way she says it is
my favorite line of hers is when she gets in the fight with that kid, and she says that he called him the N-word, and he's like, well, don't say the N-word. She's like, I didn't say it, he did. That's why I had to fight him.
That's good. Yeah.
I'm just struggling so hard. Is the right idea. I like when the kid pours the syrup, the farmer's kid pours the syrup all over his dinner. What in the Sam Hill are you doing?
This is good stuff. All right, people, go give this a watch. That's our discussion on To Kill a Mockingbird. We are going to be talking about whatever happened to Baby Jane when we come back. We'll see you soon, film fans. And we're back!
We're back. We're back and we're live. We're live.
We are live on the Facebook. Hopefully I did not just clip my microphone right there.
You might have.
Well, we are back.
That's fine.
We just had a fantastic conversation Okay. I guess I shouldn't say. It's a little subjective, I suppose, but we just had a very in-depth conversation about To Kill a Mockingbird, our first film from 1962 that we discussed. We are now talking about our second film from 1962, which is Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, which, just as a reminder, anybody who has seen FEUD or has heard of FEUD, the Ryan Murphy television limited series starring Susan Sarandon and... Oh my God, I keep wanting to say Jane Lynch. What's her name, John?
Jessica Lange. Jessica
Lange, Jesus. Two-time Academy Award winner, Jessica Lange. But before we get into Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, let's do a quick round of news and or what you've been watching. Dave, you ready to take it away?
Oh, I didn't know I was going first, but yeah.
You're always going first, Dave!
Sorry, I was fake surprise. I forgot we're on camera. I watched... Battleship this week. I went back to Battleship.
What?
Oh shit! Wait,
that was Rihanna.
Yeah.
Come on, guys, that movie is just good fun. It is good fun.
Was it as good as Geostorm? I feel like that came out the same summer.
I feel like you're borderline there. Come on. Yeah.
I feel like it was the same.
I always have a great time. I've watched it a couple of times. It's fun. It's got an AC/DC soundtrack. You can't go wrong. And when you need to distract yourself from the week that everybody else gets a fucking PS5 except you, then it's the perfect thing to sit there and watch because they're blowing the crap out of things.
Everybody got that text. What is it streaming on? Because I kind of have been wanting to watch a big, fluffy, stupid.
I think it's on HBO Max.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's on HBO Max. Yeah.
HBO Max. You're welcome. That's what you've been watching, right?
That is what I've been watching. Yeah, that was it.
Other than our movies.
Well, I kept going with Star Trek Discovery and things like that, but yeah.
Nice. Of course. I also have just kept going, kind of taking a break from my one virtuous show, Star Trek. But I went to another virtuous show. I've been watching The West Wing. I've just been crushing it. Maybe that is not the right thing to do.
So culturally relevant.
I felt like it was motivational. It was motivational leading into the election. Now I'm happy. I'm still watching it with hope that maybe it'll be something like that again. But who knows?
Hope,
Jeff, what have you been watching? So and then we're going to talk about a specific news article with David Fincher. But Jeff, what have you been watching?
Oh, yeah.
I have been begging my significant other to watch the Queen's Gambit. So I've been like literally on my hands and knees. And I'm like, can we just watch the show?
Yeah. The world is losing their mind over this.
I'm in grad school, so I don't have a ton of time. So when I have a window and I'm like, can we just watch the Queen's Gambit? I haven't started Mando yet, although I will catch up. I'm not done with The Boys, but I'm like ready for Queen's Gambit. And she is so obsessed with Nurse Jackie right now. It's almost like I feel like my hand's gonna get bit off if I reach for the controller. So we've seen 5 seasons. I haven't seen all of them, but Nurse Jackie, fantastic binge show. We've been doing a lot of the binge shows that most people did in March and April. We've been doing it in October. We watched Broadchurch and Nurse Jackie as our November shows. So anyway, we're watching that, but Queen's Gambit is next on my list. And then we got to get into the Oscar movies. But for now, that's it. BTS and Nurse Jackie. All right.
Very bingeable show.
All right. So let's get back to our podcast for our non-visual listeners. Let's go to Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. I got to give you the pitch, but it's Bette Davis versus Joan Crawford. Here we go. You ready? A former child star torments her paraplegic sister in their decaying Hollywood mansion. This is a Hollywood story for sure. With this, I'm going to use their real names, even though Baby Jane. Baby Jane is Bette Davis. Bette Davis is Baby Jane. But Baby Jane was a very, very Shirley Temple type in the vaudeville circuit. I'm going to guess 1900. I forget the year. It's 1905, something like that. And so vaudeville circuit, Baby Jane was a huge success, and her sister, played by Joan Crawford, whose character name is Blanche, kind of very Blanche Dubois-esque, is a nobody. And then flash forward until when they're in their early 20s, Blanche becomes a huge film star, and Baby Jane, Bette Davis, is not. Most of this story takes place later on when they're in their later life, and Joan Crawford's character is in a wheelchair, and Bette Davis's character, who is the former child star, who is fucking insane, is basically the caretaker for her formerly really successful and wealthy sister in their home, and there's a what's a feud? There's a huge feud back and forth. They're both kind of being vicious to each other in different ways. One's more psychological, one's more physical and psychological, and that's basically what the movie is. Who wants to take it from there?
I'll just say, if you like Stephen King's Misery, you need to see this film. And if you didn't, you still need to see this film. It takes such a fucking dark turn after the opening.
Yes.
Like, the opening leads in with the kids, and it's a song and dance number, and then, the kid throws a tantrum, you're like, all right, a little bit of drama, and then it just goes full fucking left field and turns into a psychological thriller.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a perfect example. I can't remember the last time I was this creeped out is the right word. It was creepy.
Yeah.
And
on
that
levels.
we are, we have been nurtured with all of our amazing filmmaking stuff. And, we just did a bunch of horror movies. I love thrillers. I love psychological thrillers, but we have been nurtured with all the special effects and the way we cut movies nowadays, the way we edit them. We try to scare you and creep you out differently. To use the George Lucas analogy, showing somebody as you kill the cat is way less interesting than implying that you've killed the cat. And I feel like this is a kind of a good example of these are very famous actors. And for one thing, I want to celebrate the fact that it was super refreshing watching women at their age have a story this interesting and
nothing
to know,
do with,
looking back at the history,
and
that
nothing
people
to do
went
with
to see
looks.
this fucking movie. This was not like a niche thing. This was a popular film.
Yeah, in the time it was written, that wasn't a thing.
Like, and not the had the opposite to do.
Your starlets
were
supposed
talent,
to be beautiful
right?
back then and stuff like that, and they weren't. She
was like Mrs. Havisham
from something. Like, Bette Davis made herself hideous for this film, and worked it. Yeah,
and I just think filmmaking wise, I feel like it's just a good example that it's something that kind of tying back into what we were just talking about. Most of this movie is a camera pointed at actors who are acting and talking to each other. It's not jump out scares. It's not huge set pieces. It mostly happens inside this mansion. You feel trapped inside this place with these women who are going insane. One of them is leading that place. You find out at the end that the other one was manipulating them for most of this time. We're not going to get into the details and stuff. But I don't know. I found it extremely refreshing because it's a different kind of creepy. That if this is a good example, if you don't check into world cinema, older cinema, classic movies, you might never have had this sensation before. I can't remember having had this sensation from anything I'd seen in a contemporary setting. Certainly nothing that we saw in America in the past 5 or 10 years. Did you find a comparison?
Got a comment here from Eric accusing us of just giving everything away in this movie because the history isn't revealed to the end of the film. That's not entirely the case. Their history is revealed, like, there's a twist at the end for sure, but no, we have by no means given everything away.
We've given up to like 20 minutes.
To places we haven't even touched on.
We've gone into like 20 minutes in.
Yeah, I said the manipulation thing, but
also
keep
going.
I know what you mean, Eric. I know what you mean. Bro.
I mean, there's a whole section on the end we won't even touch on because I feel like people need to experience that for themselves. But the guts of the movie is them being horrid to each other for some inadequately like some reason that we slowly becomes more apparent as it goes on. Then there's a side plot with the composer as well,
which was awesome. Oscar nominee. He was nominated for an Oscar for this. Victor Buono, who plays Edwin Flagg, the piano player.
So strange.
It's so fun and so strange and so bizarre. Yeah.
What was the point of that character? I'm not saying that negatively. It clearly mattered, but what an interesting device of a character to reveal that side of Jane.
Sorry, all I got was what the fuck is up with Edwin. He's a super creepy drunk.
Yeah,
super fucking
creepy. His mom.
Although what ended up being very helpful to me, what was very helpful to me is that, and I don't even know how to say this, you guys. Help me out here. There were some cuts to Edwin where you finally had somebody in this crazy house where he was looking at them like, oh my God, this woman is fucking insane. And I needed that. I needed to have somebody, I don't know if his character was developed in a way that would have satisfied every single person who watches this, but for those few moments where he looks at Bette Davis like, this woman is insane. Do I want to try to use her and get money out of her? Do I need to run out of here as fast as I can? I needed those moments. It was like a breather for me. It was very important for me. It was like a comma in the sentence of this
I also
movie.
think it's okay. I am torn, and I'm gonna guess the two of you are as well, of when it's good to watch this movie with IMDb. You know, back to David Fincher, what we were talking about before. I think what he's saying, he specifically said something we didn't say, which is like he misses when people go 700 to 1,200 people go to the theater to see a movie. It's been a long time since I've seen a movie with 1,200 people, if I've ever seen a movie with 1,200 people before. Even Broadway shows sometimes don't have 1,200 people. But sometimes you don't want people on their phone, but like what's going on behind the scenes, you know what I mean? Like we loved Girls, the show, because we believed that it was actually Lena Dunham and her real, you know what I mean? Like we don't separate Lena Dunham from Girls in this show. So we have FEUD, which I keep referencing, but clearly they made a series about the actual feud that was going on between Bette Davis and Joan Crawford. For instance, Joan Crawford married the CEO of Pepsi and the chairman of Pepsi. Bette Davis bought a Coke machine and put it in their green room. Just, you know what I mean? Just like stupid shit like that they were doing in real life. They were actually tormenting each other. Does that make the movie better? No, but maybe. Does it make it more fun to watch? Kind of, you know? So it's like, if you're watching this at home, you're like, why would I watch this movie from...
They definitely
Some of you might not even know who Bette Davis is, and she's one of the most famous, successful actresses of all time. And here we are, we're talking about this movie, her and Joan Crawford. They're both Oscar winners. They're both in the end of their career, and they're both feuding on screen, which mirrors a feud that's going on behind the scenes. I think that's fucking fascinating. Like, there's some really interesting shit going on with this. But yeah, so as far as, so back to Eric's point, Eric, you're all good, man. But you talked about how much information to give away. Let's give some of this information away because it makes it I want you to watch this movie and sit there and go, one of them slaps the shit out of the other one. I'm telling you, because I just saw this movie, that slap was probably real. I'm just gonna go ahead and say that.
Yeah, probably connected.
That slap was real.
Somebody was tied up in a scene.
That slap
Somebody was
real?
tied up in a scene. Do you think that the other actress purposefully was fucking up lines so that person would be tied up for longer? Maybe. I think it makes the movie kind of fun to watch that way.
I don't know. I don't know if we can back that one. You might be making shit up.
Might be making shit up, but if you're are you curious at home? Because that's the best part of the movie for me, is I'm sitting there and I'm going, the twist was fun. But
I mean, you also watch a lot of reality TV.
I don't watch a lot of reality television. I've already talked about my situation and the TV, the tit-a-tat that goes on with the remote.
The one thing I did like was principal shooting was a month. They shot over a month. And a month later, they were sneak previewing this thing in theaters.
Yeah, there's a quick turnaround. And
like 2 months for a turnaround for a film.
Two fucking pros.
And even though they hated each other, they both got back-end credits because this was new to that back then, where they both were considered they were both considered producers. They were both very successful by this point. So they were given, how brilliant is this? So that they had to promote the movie together because they had financial stake in it, and they fucking hated each other in real life. But they had to put on a show and promote this movie because they would make more money if the movie was successful. That's fun. That's a fun reason to be entertained by this movie.
Did you find when they because there's times when she mimics Joan Crawford, and because she couldn't get the voice right,
I'm sure you looked that up.
Dubbed Joan Crawford's voice on. Did you find that super creepy? Because she's like the face she's making, and then that other voice comes out, and I'm like, that's fucking creepy. It's really unsettling when she does it.
There are moments that exist, and like, I encourage people to try to watch older movies and world cinema, because there are some things like that, like a detail like that, where they were dubbing a lot of the audio anyway. So you can't get away with something like that nowadays. It added this other fantastical element that made it more creepy when they exploited it, because we knew that it was dubbed audio. It just made it stranger. It didn't affect the realism of the film. It didn't affect anything like that, because we were already trapped in this older style of filmmaking anyway. When she kicks her, when she fucking beats the shit out of her, when she kicks her right in the head and lays her out, that fucking scared me. Bette Davis's voice work in this movie is unbelievable. Yeah. But you are, Blanche. You are in that chair. Like, just everything.
It's very Grey Gardens.
The whole thing was super Grey Gardens. I'm reading some trivia here. She was talking about how, she knew she wanted that kind of look with makeup, and she decided to do it herself because She knew nobody would
wash her face.
agree.
Yeah.
She did her own makeup, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she's right here. If anybody's watching this video, like, there's these.
She looks like a doll. Like, she looks like a doll gone bad.
And again, I want to kind of go back to what I was saying about the women of a certain age in certain types of roles. This isn't me just saying, oh, that's PC and that's correct. What came out of it when they said, fuck it, I want to do this anyway? And I don't know if society wanted them to do it or if they were ready for it or if Hollywood thought this was a great idea, but they did it anyway. And all that really happens is a good story that an audience member can enjoy, and people in the industry and fans of cinema can look at actors like that and realize how brave of both of them was it to say, fuck it, let's do it anyway. And let's lean into this and let's not be glamorous. Yeah. Let's show two women on their way out of that kind of lifestyle, that bullshit kind of material thing when they were both stars. This movie has nothing to do with that part of their life. That is barely expositional, because the only interesting stuff is when they are dealing with each other. And I don't know, I just feel like it's so respectable, and I don't think we make enough room for that in our storytelling nowadays. I think we tend to praise the come up and not the dealing with it, the conflict, the real life aspect. It actually ended up being more realistic to me because of that, even though I made that fantastical element. Sure. Go.
We got the gush alarm for John. Well, I was gonna make sort of a little pitch before I send it on, which is to your point, John. We don't celebrate that, which is a huge thing of Sunset Boulevard, is this fall down, that we're glorifying that fall down. And in real life, we love it. We love it when Lindsay Lohan and Britney Spears, when at least we think, we don't really know these people, but we think we know what's going on, and we think it's a fall from grace, and that's exciting. What if Olivia de Havilland had a sister in Sunset Boulevard who was a tormentor? Like, this is a Hollywood story about two women in weird positions, but what if the unsuccessful sister had the fall down that Olivia de Havilland did? And Olivia, you know what I mean? Like that's the kind of stuff is going on with me. These stories that they seem so similar to each other.
Do you mean Gloria Swanson?
And yet
like the character of Norma Desmond in Sunset Boulevard?
Yes, exactly. Oh shit, I was saying the wrong name. I'm so sorry. Yes.
Jeff cannot read
tonight. Can you buzz me for that? Because I have a 9% beer. I'm not reading.
But I know what you mean.
But they're just like but I'm trying to get people to watch this movie, and it's on the Criterion channel, which obviously we have, as a podcast, have been trying to get you to subscribe to for this whole time. Yeah. But it's a good, if you like Sunset Boulevard, you're going to like this, because it's like that, but rather than glorifying it, they show us the ugly. They show us the nasty between the two sisters, and it seems pleasant.
So interesting to me.
It's so
fun. I'm very aware, audience, I'm going to put my foot in my mouth, I'm sure, but like this is a cisgender, white, straight male saying this in this time and age. But it's interesting, when I started watching movies from this period, basically from the 30s too, including all the screwball comedies, there was a first wave of feminism that happened in the 50s, which we can all look at and study from like a scholarship point of view, but culturally, artistically, the leading ladies that these women were a part of in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, I encourage everyone to go back and watch what they were doing, the way they wrote dialogue for these women. These were not sex objects. These were women who, this is not a surprise. It's not a surprise when you see what their careers did up to this moment that they choose to make this movie. Something happened with the way we started casting leading women and character actresses after this period, starting in the later 60s and the 70s, and definitely in the 80s when it got out of control and the corporations got involved. So I also feel like, just if you like to think of yourself as a responsible audience member, and you feel like you're thinking about the issues that are being raised nowadays, maybe start with this movie and work backwards to watch what these incredible women did on screen. And I don't know, I think you're going to be very impressed. I know shit was fucked up in a different way behind the scenes back then, and we weren't there, so we can't comment on it directly. But there was a different style of writing for women, and these, I don't know, I just feel like this movie, it was just such a breath of fresh air. I mean, I can't remember. Let's just be honest. FEUD starred women of this age only because it was based on a movie that happened in 1962. I don't know if that show would have been as successful had it not been based on these real life actresses. I want to believe that we would have tuned in and watched it. because Ryan Murphy knows how to write stuff, and those actresses are wonderful, and we would have paid attention to it. But I don't know. I don't know if we would have. Do you disagree with that?
I don't disagree with any of that. Yeah. I mean, I just want to point out, when you mentioned the writing, I'd like to point out 2 lines in this film that really stood out to me. When they're in the fight, and she's like, "It's my house," and it doesn't matter whose house it is. You got to act like a grown woman, like everyone else. I was like, if that's not poignant to today's fucking news cycle, what is?
Yes.
And the other one was the most heartbreaking fucking line in the film is like after the twist and everything has happened, and she just looks at her totally blank face and says, "You realize all this time we could have been friends." And I think it's the saddest line delivery I've ever heard in my life.
How awesome is that?
And it's like I'm
Too
not giving
right?
away anything there, but it's that line is earned, and that line is well delivered, and it's a perfect ending to the film, and it hits you right in the feels.
And just since this movie is technically, I do want to make this comment. Since this movie is technically in the horror genre, from back then it was kind of billed as horror.
Yeah, this
is
not a horror film.
There are Jeff and I have mentioned before. We come from music theater backgrounds. Horror has used music theater in interesting ways.
I've written a letter to Daddy,
and I have bitched before on this podcast about how I hate music theater is used adapted for film. What an unbelievable vehicle to show you what is happening. The degradation of Bette Davis's character with the use of music theater. When she actually performs her songs, it is terrifying. It is probably the most horrible. I mean, even the beginning.
There's no flooring.
Even the beginning is scary. The voice they chose for her singing voice as a child is terrifying. It's such an interesting use of the medium of musicals in a time period in the 60s when musicals were exploding out of Fox Studios. I mean, right? It was Fox, right? Yeah.
Let's make everyone hate them.
Really interesting.
I love that too. And really again, cool. Literally my whole segment right now is just trying to get people to watch this. So to John's point about this being horror, this apparently created a subgenre called hag horror, which I'm sure is demeaning to women. It's basically like older women horror. I imagine, again, it would be like if Mrs. Havisham had her own movie, would it be hag horror?
I don't know if that's what it references. I think it references actresses that transform themselves.
I hope you're right. I hope you're right.
Like as I cited earlier, Stephen King's Misery.
I hope you're right. It also has
That's a cup half full.
It also has psycho biddy, hagsploitation, and grande dame. It doesn't matter. Anyway, so I said Sunset Boulevard. Another thing that I thought about watching this movie, specifically to psycho biddy and hag horror, of course, is Fatal Attraction. So if you want to watch like a tentpole film starring two Oscar winners, like 2 all-timers, Joan Crawford and Bette Davis are all-timers, and you can see Fatal Attraction coming from this movie. You can see what would happen if Alfred Hitchcock couldn't be in charge of his leading ladies? Like, what if they were autonomous? What if they were, and they hated each other, but the one thing they always said about each other is that they were each pros. They never disrespected each other's professionalism. And I think that this is just an all-timer movie. I had no idea. You guys talked me into watching this movie. I did not recommend this, and I'm so glad you did. This, I'm literally, I was watching this, and I said,
what this was about.
I said, thank God we have a fucking podcast, because I would have died not seeing this movie, and I'm so happy I saw this movie.
Watch this movie.
This is one of those. I'm ashamed too. This is one of those that's been on my list for a long time, and I have not done a deep enough dive into Bette Davis's work.
There is,
I'm thinking that
there is a Fatal Attraction reference. If you know your Fatal Attraction with the bunny and the soup, those dinner plates. One of the sisters who's tormenting her, she opens up the dinner platter and she lifts off the lid. And I'll just say, if you've seen Fatal Attraction and you know the bunny reference with the boiling bunny, not too dissimilar. I'm telling you, like it's here. Know your history, people. This is amazing.
And I'm going to tie it into our David Fincher conversation, and maybe this will be the ending. He was talking about, I was listening to him recently talking about making Panic Room, and how he was like, he's interested. He always likes messing with thriller material because there's not as much pressure put on you as a director to like, what are you trying to say with this movie? Like people can, just have fun and go on dates and watch these kinds of things. And he was talking about the slow motion sequence in Panic Room where she runs to get the cell phone.
Oh my God.
And she can't quite reach it. It's falling away. And he was like, God damn it. Well, if we're going to pander, let's fucking pander. This movie puts on a fucking clinic when Joan Crawford is going down the stairs for how to pander a suspense scene in a thriller movie. Like, you've been waiting for her to do this the whole fucking time. You're so angry at her that she hasn't done it already. And then she takes a million years to climb down these stairs, and it's just so effective. It doesn't matter that it feels like it's falling into a genre thing. She's acting so sincerely that it's impressive as fuck. And I don't know if it was one of the first times these devices were used, but I feel like it's just another good example that when your actors know what the fuck they're doing and you sincerely go for it, it doesn't matter if it's a device or not, it's going to be effective. Because when Bette Davis came back home, I was terrified.
Same.
I was very unsettled.
Yeah. With the piece of paper. Shout out to David Fincher for the Panic Room reference, John. Thank you, Dave.
Yeah.
Oh, you're welcome.
All right, we got to bring this home.
Are you ready for the random year generator?
The short answer is watch this movie. What we're going to do is we're going to say a quick goodbye to everyone who joined us for Facebook Live tonight. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Eric, for your comments. We really appreciate that feedback. Appreciate it.
Baby Jane.
I mean, that picture is fucking haunting. To anybody on this podcast, find us on YouTube, because that picture next to John, look at Bette Davis next to that doll, and you know you're in for a very fun ride. It's fucking fucked up.
Scary shit.
Holy shit.
All right, and we're going to bring it on home with a random year.
Anything you want to shout out during the sound effect? Anybody? Congratulations.
Just for that, I'm not doing the sound effect.
I watched The Masters. Dustin Johnson. I forgot I mentioned that before. Okay.
Also, Jeff.
DJ.
Get the fuck out.
Unbelievable. Course records. So many records. Unbelievable.
All right. Our year is 1975.
I think it's an all-timer year, right? All right, people. We will talk about this soon. Film fans, thank you so much for sticking with this segment. We'll see you in a second. And we're back!
We're back. What a discussion that was.
We just had a fantastic discussion during your 30-second break, film fans. We were talking about which films from 1975 we should do, and I'm going to tell you right now, we chose two fantastic films to talk about on our episode next week. I cannot wait for our discussion, but you will find out. You will find out the three films that we are going to talk about in our next week's episode at the end of this. First, we got to finish up this week's pod, which is our discussion of 1962. We are now in our redemption segment, or was it really that bad? For context, we have all been drinking now for over 2 hours. My beer is 9%. I believe some of you also had similarly strong beer. Shout out to Glenn's podcast, The Beer Vengers, which John was on recently, talking about beer. 9% beers, people. Well, here we are talking about Godzilla vs. King Kong.
John wasn't on that.
I wasn't on that podcast.
So here we are talking about Godzilla.
Jeff is drinking 9% beer.
Here we are talking about.
Listen to the Beer Avengers.
We're talking about Godzilla.
Talking to the Beer Avengers.
They're our friends.
It's so good.
Did we plug you enough, Beer Avengers? Go listen to Beer Avengers.
We're talking about Godzilla vs. King Kong.
Go listen to Beer Avengers, where we are definitely not on the show.
It's King Kong versus Godzilla, motherfucker. It's not even Godzilla versus King Kong.
No, it's Godzilla versus King Kong.
No.
It's King Kong versus Godzilla. No.
Did you watch it? Did you watch the movie? Oh my god!
I watched. I just wrote it down wrong. There's no way we can re-record this, right? There's no way.
No, there is no way we can re-record this.
All right, everybody.
This is good.
I wish
Shout
this was
out to
live.
the Beer Avengers podcast here for sponsoring our King Kong vs. Godzilla segment. So this is our redemption segment where we, since this podcast is a drinking game where we can only say positive shit about movies, we are going to have to redeem this fucking movie, which is available on YouTube.
He's joking.
So, this is we as John said before, we don't have the Criterion Spine. It was very expensive to get all those movies, so we didn't do that. So here we are. It's on YouTube for free. There are English dubs that generally makes this movie. That generally makes the movie worse. English dubs. This case, Here's basically the pitch. The pitch is it's King Kong versus Godzilla. That's the fucking pitch of the movie. This is 1962.
Pitch is over.
What they actually say the plot is this is IMDb. a newspaper and television station funded by a pharmaceutical company want a sensation, which happens to be the discovery of King Kong on an island. He is captured and brought to Japan, where he escapes from captivity and battles Godzilla. That's bullshit. That's not what this movie's about. So this movie really, in my words, which are very lucid right now, are Godzilla is discovered. Now, as anybody who knows their Godzilla lore knows that it has something to do with nuclear fission. But here we are in 1962, and he just appears in an iceberg. He just appears literally in an iceberg in the South China Sea. I guess it's technically in Japan, but like in near Australia. Dave, were you happy to see Australia on a map? That was pretty fun. Anyway,
I actually didn't look closely. They have New Zealand on there because there's a conspiracy to not include it on a map anywhere.
I mean, if they did have New Zealand looked like a moon of Australia, so small. Like Australia was huge. It almost took me a second to figure out where they were. Anyway, so they saw some radioactive shit going on in the middle of an iceberg in the middle outside, let's say outside of Japan. And also separately, King Kong is a god on this island. And they don't know how to stop Godzilla from going to Tokyo because they believe Godzilla is going to go attack Tokyo. So they go to the island where King Kong is and expedite him to Japan so that he can compete with Godzilla. That's the story. Godzilla's on his way. We don't want to nuke him with atomic bombs, so we get King Kong to do our dirty work for us. That's the pitch. Who wants to go first?
They outsourced King Kong.
That's what it is. That's the movie.
Man, I'll tell you, like, I was like, all right, we're doing this, whatever. And it starts with like a stop frame Earth circling, like rotating, and then
a quote from Hamlet.
And again, a quote from Hamlet. I'm like, we started with Shakespeare and stop frame animation, and suddenly my expectations went through the roof for this movie.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I mean, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamed of in your philosophy. I mean, that is how they and that was just the English version. They didn't. There are so many things about this movie. There's a very prominent segment of a UN representative who is like reporting to the United States that was not in the Japanese version, apparently. This movie touched me. You guys, I watched this a lot when I was a kid. This was like one of my sleepover movies.
Wait, you'd seen this movie before?
Yeah, I think Disney at one point
because it made everyone go to sleep.
Nah, dude, nah. Oh, come on, I like it. I think there are. You have to be able to laugh, but like, is there a better movie for like shitty miniatures?
I was just gonna ask that. Did you think those tanks were not miniatures when you were young?
No, not at all, right?
I think everybody's
you knew it was fake and you were like, this is ridiculous. But
I think everybody's seen the pictures of like the Godzilla like action figures trampling over Tokyo. Like we've seen those in the original Godzilla in the 30s. But these miniatures, those tanks were running away as if they were the toaster in Star Wars running from Chewbacca. It was like childish. So
that specific shot when they're going the other way,
in the mountain,
they're about face.
Yeah, there were no humans in those tanks. Those tanks were themselves the human. They were literally like, "Get us out of here!" Ah!
I mean, to be honest, I expected this to be way worse than it was.
Oh, it was so entertaining.
They wrote it as a lighthearted comedy, and it's throw back to Network. It was they were taking the piss out of the media basically because the media treats this like a fucking prize fight.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, we got Godzilla, we got King Kong. They're gonna get it on. Like, we're gonna like fight and we're gonna show it, and like the whole thing was a piss take of the media with some other fun stuff thrown in.
I want to talk about that for a second because one of my first notes was the news reporters who, for the most part, are talking direct to camera, so that takes a second to get used to. They give you a lot of the exposition, so they just say straight out, "There's radioactivity going on in an iceberg, and so therefore the Japanese government sends some ships. Let's go see where they are. Oh, they did discover Godzilla. Well, there's also a god who may be King Kong on an island. We should go there." So there's a little bit of spoon feeding going on, but once you realize it's a comedy, it changes. And also, I had the funny thing happen where there's a device, but maybe I shouldn't get to this too soon, but let's just say, first of all, King Kong is so ugly in this, but in an endearing way. Is the most unattractive creature I've ever seen on screen. That King Kong face is just hideous. But let's just say they put King Kong to sleep. And rather than pull a Lost World Jurassic Park where they put him on a boat in a cage, at least, they tie him to balloons. Well, I guess at first they put him on a raft and eventually tie him to balloons. So again, before I realized it was a comedy and they were going to be doing weird shit with the fact that you could just lull King Kong to sleep like the three-headed dog in Harry Potter, I saw that twice by accident because I stopped it and I was like, I have to go do something. And then when I came back, I watched it again and I realized how funny it was. I didn't realize it was a comedy at first, but I'm really glad I had to see that again.
I mean, it was like being in Australia or the Gold Coast at 3 a.m. Like King Kong comes out, beats up a fucking octopus, gets pissed on berry juice and passes out.
What is with us watching octopus movies? Why do we always pick octopus movies?
Honestly, I was thinking, like, is this the same octopus as Ed Wood's movie? One of my favorite pieces of trivia is the first piece of trivia. It's not just because it's the first one, but it's the first piece of trivia on IMDb. The special effects operator or supervisor, they used 4 octopuses throughout that sequence. They released 3 of them, and he ate the last one.
Yeah,
the special effects supervisor.
Bad form special effects supervisor.
Japan,
that's for you.
I did like. So it's interesting. I'm glad you brought that up because, like, apparently Ishiro Honda was always frustrated with the latter Godzillas because those kinds of comedic takes on these kinds of movies were really popular in Japan at the time, and he didn't think it was funny. He liked, it was like his baby, Godzilla, and he wanted people to have a more thrilling experience. So I do think it created like a weird dichotomy of people, kind of like our Batman conversation last week. Like people were maybe used to seeing a slightly more, not serious, but a slightly more thrilling take on Godzilla. And then this one was clearly like ridiculous. I appreciate.
The thing is, some of a lot of it was the American stuff they added that was ridiculous.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I guess we'll never know.
I mean, the media sets look like a Star Trek cosplay basement.
Yeah, I know. It looks super cheap, but I did appreciate that the way they use the cut-ins of the media, that they didn't have to justify what the monsters did next. They would just cut away from it.
Yeah.
And then they would tell you like an actual news report would be, if you were actually there on the islands of Japan, they would say, and now Godzilla is moving towards this city. They didn't need to show you how we got there. They didn't need to show you what happened when they cut away from it. Actually, I thought that was
what that reminded
a very malleable device.
That reminded me of War of the Worlds.
Yeah.
The broadcast.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It felt like that, which I thought was cool. Like it kind of elevated it beyond just the ridiculous comedic thing that was going on throughout. Because if you only concentrate on the fact that the suits are horrible, like especially Kong's suit, like apparently they really wanted him, point of view wise, they wanted the audience to root for Kong, so they tried to make his face more easy to look at for children. They didn't want his face, but it was fucking terrifying. in their attempt to make it more pleasing, it like made it horrible to look at.
This guys, please watch this movie on YouTube and turn it into a drinking game. It is so ridiculous. There is a time where when Godzilla is finally getting close and they need Kong to go fight Godzilla, and Kong does not want to fight Godzilla. So they lull him to sleep with some weird ass tribal chanting, and they literally pull an Up. Yes, the movie Up, and they tie balloons to him and float him through the sky on balloons while he's asleep. And I'm telling you right now, it is worth the hour and a half watching this movie to see King Kong, who is clearly a very unattractive man in an unattractive monkey suit, wake up in the middle of the air, floating via balloon to the middle of nowhere. It is worth the price. It is worth the time. Yeah. It is 100% worth it.
I tell you what,
that was a good piece of trivia.
The one thing that the news coverage, like the constant news coverage though, did start to feel to me like, you know, when you tune into a sports event about an hour and a half too early and they're just fucking filling in time.
Yeah. I mean, you are just waiting for the showdowns, of course, and it's kind of a letdown that the first showdown is not a showdown at all.
Right. The guy's name is
Sir
Taco.
There was a fun piece of trivia. Because these were two real humans inside these suits that were fighting around miniature sets.
Shocking.
There is a big throw at one point where Kong body tosses Godzilla. And these are two judo champions from Japan who are inside these suits. And apparently the guy who's playing Godzilla with the suit on weighed 300 pounds. And it was like a big deal. And the guy in King Kong suit was like, no, let me do it in real life. Don't use the stop motion. I want to do this. And it was like a big deal that he threw a 300-pound Godzilla actor man across into the fucking miniature sets.
That final battle, I call unfair fight. Kong used performance-enhancing electricity.
Yeah. I love how they just threw that in there for no reason at all. That didn't exist in his lore at all. There's no reason it shouldn't be Godzilla who can thrive on electricity. No, it's the mammalian chimpanzee.
The radioactive
gorilla thrives on electricity. I mean, it's campy, it's ridiculous, but it really works.
You guys, I don't care.
It's one of those movies you get drunk with your friends and have a party and watch. As
I'm telling you, I had tons of fun. Or make your chocolate milk when you're 8 years old and fucking sit up all night and watch a bunch of Godzilla movies. I used to love these movies when I was fun. And no joke, this made me really excited for Godzilla versus Kong, the 2021
what
release.
Is the fucking culture shock going to be of watching that after watching this?
With Billy Bobby Brown.
Listeners, film fans, one time Jeff and I got very affected by a green plant. And we went to the movies and we saw that first Godzilla, 2014. Is that when it came out? 2016? The first one of these reboots. This monster verse. And we had an amazing time. It was fucking terrifying. I love what they're doing in these new things. But just to tie it back into this old movie, when I started watching these movies when I was a kid, it was kind of my first experience of getting into a universe. So I remember this movie doesn't open with it, but with the way they discover Godzilla, when they ram into this iceberg and he's trapped in the iceberg, I was like, wait a second, does that mean that in a previous movie, Godzilla got trapped in the iceberg? Because I know there are other Godzilla movies. And it kind of launched me into this whole chasing down like the other Godzilla movies as a child. So even though this movie is kind of crappy and it's just kind of a joke, it was the first experience I had watching like a series. I remember I got super obsessed with like how they tracked Godzilla through time with the history of Japan.
It made you curious. It did its job. I mean, there was one section in it that was a little personal to me. It was like when they're walking on the island, the two Japanese guys have gone to the island, and this one guy freaks out and jumps, and the other guy's like, "Oh, it's only a lizard," then promptly blows it away with a shotgun. I had a throwback to the day that my dad stepped on a king brown snake in the backyard in Australia. And it was the same thing. And he went and got the shotgun off the wall and he blew the crap out of that thing. I was like, oh, it's a little bit of personal stuff for me. Yes.
Jesus Christ. Yeah, no,
I mean,
you used to shoot
King Browns are deadly, man. It's the worst part was he wanted me to lift a piece of tin that it was under, and I was like, fuck off, I'm not lifting that. Yeah.
How about when they give that child cigarettes? Do you remember that spot? They're like, no, don't let your mom see these. And it like cuts up to his mom and she like steals the cigarettes from the kid and just starts chain smoking.
The mom just that's
ridiculous,
funny.
Dude.
How about
but the funniest thing for me was the wire, when they introduced the wire, the high tensile wire that's stronger than steel.
We have to justify the balloons.
Yeah, but the test, they're just having dinner, and for some reason he brings up this wire. It's like, have you seen this? And he has it in his pocket, and it's on this rollout thing. He then promptly attaches it to his belt, and he's like, yeah, swinging out off the balcony. I fucking laughed out loud, man. I pissed myself at that scene.
I was like, the dubbing in that scene is fantastic.
It took me so long. And there's a character named Sir Taco who almost sets off a bomb because the only people guarding the bomb are two guys in Hawaiian shirts who'd say, hey, you shouldn't set that bomb off because that's a bomb. Anyway, I don't know why I didn't realize this was a comedy until I saw Unibrowed Sir Taco. I was like, oh, is he the comic relief? And I was like, no, he's the movie. This is the tone that this movie's in. They're the UN Goodwill ambassadors that show up to King Kong's island and basically encourage. They bring the whole island community with them to Japan so that they can lull King Kong to sleep. How did I not know? Like, I really thought, I was like, is this one of those, like, is it like The Room? Is it one of those like good, bad movies? I didn't realize it was a comedy because I thought this was their one chance to get these two villains against each other.
I realized it was a comedy. Like
I realized eventually, it just took a long time.
There's even snappy humor. Like the families stare and they're like, "We need to go to Hokkaido," and straight away it cuts the news. Do not go to Hokkaido.
Well, because it's you just don't see Luke. You don't see Luke Skywalker and Michael Corleone in like a gay slasher fiction movie. You know what I mean? Like, you don't see that. And here to see Godzilla and King Kong.
And in your defense,
what?
And in your defense, in your defense, the American parts of it, the UN guy, that is not comedic.
Right.
So it is. I do feel like this English version doesn't quite line up with the Japanese version. The things,
the Goodwill stuff is kind of funny.
I mean, I like it.
It's insensitive.
I like when they interview the man from the Museum of Natural History in New York, and he's like, Godzilla seems to be a cross between a Tyrannosaurus Rex and the Stegosaurus.
And they talk about the brain size. Godzilla's brain is the size of a peanut, whereas Kong is a thinking beast. Yeah. It's like,
yes,
I think, where they try to. I don't know. It's just. Ridiculous.
They go into way more detail than they should for a comedy romp, but it is. I mean, it is fun. Again, like I said,
guys, tell me,
it's something you get your friends together in a room and watch the film and see if they still follow you on Instagram the next morning.
Get a rapid test, and then hang out and watch this movie.
Did they dub the submarine was supposed to be American, right?
Yeah. I think so.
I'm not sure.
Did they dub English voices?
That is a fantastic drinking game. Like every time one of the Asian actors sounds like an American, drink.
That's interesting.
That's every.
Well, some of them are.
You're going to be wasted. You're going to have alcohol poisoning.
You'd be like Jeff for trying to intro this segment.
Oh boy. Oh
what
boy.
What did you call it? That was good.
I just switched the time. I just switched.
Yeah, I also just trying to. Let's just segue for a second, Jeff. How are you this fucking hammered when we just did 2 segments where there were only 2 buzzers?
I still drink when I don't get buzzed.
Beers.
Just so you know, I still drink. Also,
the 9%.
People listening to this podcast are probably wondering what happened to us between Betty, Jean, and this. It was a 35-minute talk about which movies from 1975 we should do.
Yeah,
and do you know how to get through a 30? Do you know how to get through trying to figure out what's available for streaming and what's good and what's a redemption? You know, it's like you drink your way through it. That's what happens. I think that's about it to wrap it up. So I think we redeemed this movie because this is a really fucking fun movie. I think we did it.
This is a fun movie. Like I bagged the shit out of it, but this was fun. I laughed out loud several times.
This gimmick doesn't always work because sometimes we just get drunk and we just talk crap about these movies. But we redeemed this movie.
Did it.
Go watch this movie.
That's 3 for 3. Watch these movies.
Wow, it's on 3 for 3. This one just is right up there.
This movie is as important as To Kill a Mockingbird. Put it on your list.
After the whole conversation, get out of here with that. Friends, it's been so fun. Dave is going to introduce to you all the movies we're going to do next week. They're all available for streaming except for one. Of course not. Okay, go ahead. What are we watching next week, Dave?
All right, we're going back to 1975 next week. We're going to take a dive into One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Never heard of it. Kidding.
Which I feel like it's something we were born to do. Dog Day Afternoon's getting a segment.
Yeah, Attica!
Yeah.
And then we're gonna try and redeem Death Race 2000.
Very excited.
It's gonna go well.
Not my first choice, but I'm very excited. Friends, thank you so much for joining us. John, Dave, any final words before we head out? No? Nope. Cool. All right, let's do it. See you next week, film fans. Have a great night or a good day.